Hello and welcome to Fat Sam's podcast. This is a very exciting episode for myself. Actually, it's more nerve-wracking than exciting. This is a subject that's really close to my heart. It's it's a bit of a taboo subject. Not many people want to talk about it, but we're gonna, like we say, we're gonna smash stereotypes and we're gonna hit these subjects head on. Now, today I am joined by an expert in construction, substance abuse, and mental health. Her name is Anna Costello. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you. Hello.
Anna, tell us a little bit about yourself.
And then when I was 25, I had, lucky enough to have an opportunity to really think about what I wanted to do with kind of job wise. And it was then that I decided that I would go and train to be a counsellor. So I started that. And at the same time as starting that, I took on a full-time voluntary role in a homeless hostel, which was really the start of getting to know kind of addiction and mental health and the kind of depths of despair that addiction and mental health could take a person to. So, and working with people that, some of them potentially really difficult to engage and really entrenched in kind of what they were doing and how they were. When I finished my counselling course, I'd also had experience of kind of working in supported housing, which was for kind of people with mental health problems. So I kind of got a really kind of thorough experience of the diagnosis of mental health and mental illness. So that was all good experience. But after finishing my counselling, I worked in a drug and alcohol rehab. And this was for people that had done an assisted detox, and it was a 12-step program. And, the NA and AA are just kind of one aspect of recovery. It's, I'm not here to advocate any recovery type, but this was a fellowship rehab, and, and also there's a lot of benefits of the NA and AA, the shared identification, the group support. So the rehab was, kind of group counselling, one-to-one counselling. It was fairly tight on the old rules and boundaries, and kind of people were expected to kind of, be abstinent from all substances. So lots of cravings, lots of struggles. It was hard. Statistically, there was a big dropout from rehab. So I did that for a few years, really enjoyed that, really enjoyed working, many wonderful people with many stories to tell. That was probably, where are we in years? Probably about 2005. And it was at that time, I think, kind of, nationally kind of funding started to kind of, the purse strings started to get tighter, and rehabs kind of, did start to close, unfortunately. From there, I was lucky enough to get a job where I was to set up a family service for family members affected by people's addiction in Lambeth. And of course, addiction does not only affect the person that's using, but all their family members as well. And
can be devastating.
Yeah. And there's a relationship between addiction and family, and the original family impacts on the addiction, and the addiction impacts on the kind of now family.
Yeah.
And I also worked as part of that role in a house that was managed by NACRO, which was for men that had served a custodial sentence because of drug-related crime. So we did a lot of work in that rehab around kind of family issues and recovery. And that wasn't 12-step approach. That was kind of harm minimisation and mainly crack users, and trying to kind of, really focus on that drug, which was the kind of the drug of choice and associated mainly with the criminal behaviour. And then from there, then I had some children, so I had some time off work, and then I've been recently working in school, and I work in a mental health project in school, but I tend to work with the parents. And again, that, the benefits of working with any individual in a therapeutic pragmatic sense or a supportive sense, is that, you know, you make the parent happier. As a byproduct, you're hopefully going to make the children happier. So the outcome for everybody is better. So I've really enjoyed that. And again, you know, you're working in the construction industry all the way along. The construction industry is massive. So whoever you work with in whatever setting, the construction industry kind of always comes in, you know, whether that's men working in there or whether that's working with children whose dads or mums are working in the construction industry, or working with partners that's going out with somebody in the construction working in the construction industry. So yeah, it's always been there. On what I'm doing now is I've set up, and it's just all very new, and it's the worst time. It has been the worst time to set up anything, because I started it right at the beginning of COVID. But it's called Constructing Wellbeing, and what I'm aiming to do is to deliver training on mental health and substance misuse to construction workers, and it's been specifically designed for the construction industry. And the way it came about was Seamus now works for a large
And Seamus is your husband?
Yeah, so he works for a large NHS addiction service. He came back one day and he just happened to kind of mention that a foreman from a building site had contacted their service looking for somebody to do drug and alcohol training, because one of the workers had died from a drug-related death, and, you know, which had obviously had an impact on the whole site. But also he recognised that there was drug and alcohol problems in his workforce, and that people were struggling with drug and alcohol. I didn't do that training, but that for me was a light bulb moment. I just felt that, you know, my experience was relevant, but more than that, it's like a passion to kind of work with people who don't necessarily access good knowledge or support on mental health and addiction issues. And that does, you know, as I've kind of found out, statistically, that does include the construction industry.
Yeah, for me, the untold damage of substance abuse within the construction industry, I feel like it's an untold story. I feel like it's right there. Like if you walk onto a construction site, you might meet 100 people in a day, and you'll all have a story to share about getting on it, getting drunk, all that sort of stuff. The culture's prevalent. I'm not saying it's everyone, because it's just not. There's healthy people in every walks of life. But my worry is that there is an untold story about drug abuse, substance abuse, alcohol abuse within within trade professionals and the construction industry. And it's about unpacking that and what can be done, and just casting a light on it. Because actually, myself, I actually, before we get into myself, what I want to say is, with the construction industry misuse, there's two sides to that coin. And one is someone who uses, and someone who uses because of the strains of the mental health strains of working in construction. And that's a funny thing that a lot of people don't realize. Working in construction can have so many undesired side effects, from from, you know, late payment, job security, getting the job finished on time, pressure from your bosses, pressure from the client, and all these things then spiral out of control. You start drinking, then you might open up to something else, getting a gram to make the night go by, then getting drunk to get sleep, waking up the next day. Now you already feel bad. Now now you've got a chain reaction of bad decisions that follow on for the rest of the week. And that's certainly my story, in terms of this chain reaction by just using and drinking and using and drinking, and just ending up as like a bit of a mess. And I see that so often. And what I wanted to do is sort of unpack these reasons with you, because obviously you see this, and it might be interesting for you to tell us a little bit about the figures you've uncovered from your research.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're all aware of the Considerate Constructors Scheme, and they did a couple of surveys, spotlight surveys, in 2016. So, the two statistics that come out of here on drugs and alcohol. So 59% of industry workers felt that there is a current health and safety issue relating to drugs and alcohol. So that's, pretty much 60% of workers.
That's mad.
Knowing that there is a problem. And, and as you say, kind of going into work in a tough industry anyway, and all the stresses and strains of the job, and yet being aware of this additional problem, the elephant in the room that perhaps people aren't talking about, where you're aware that your colleagues are struggling and yet you can't do anything about that, or maybe you're struggling yourself and you're not getting the right sort of help.
There's also a bit of a culture of, just get on with it, or listen, I don't care, I just want the job done. So then also not trying to be too and there's a culture. There's two types of way of being employed. There's a subcontractor. Certainly in my industry. So in my sector, you could be a subcontractor, or you can be on the cards. Now, construction as a whole, you can be a self-employed contractor. That's a whole nother set of problems. But I'm only going to talk about what I know, because it's what I know, and that is the subcontractor industry that I work in. It's prevalent across all trades, and when you are as disposable as they come on site. So if you turn up with a problem, they're gonna send you out the door instead of dealing with that problem. Which, I can't blame them, because you're not trying to hire a problem, are you? So from a business point of view, that makes sense. But there's a lot of things that can feed into this mentality that starts this spiral of doom, if you like. So I used to get terrible anxiety before I went to a job. I used to sort of walk around outside, not because I was worried about who I would meet inside. I just didn't really fancy it. But I was all right once I was in, but I'd be walking around outside being like, I don't really fancy this. I used to get anxiety before I started a job. And they can, like, someone else might get anxiety about starting a job and turn to drink. That's the thing. And then then that spirals into poor sleep, that spirals into behavioral issues, and then you're back on the spiral of doom. And what I find is, in the subcontracting industry, it's so soulless. It's such a soul destroying industry if you approach it in the wrong way, and so many do. So if you approach it from a point where you've got a few quid behind you, so you can make a decision on if that job's for you or not. But a lot of people get into a mindset where they've got to do this week, because they're living from paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, and if they miss one of those paychecks, they're like living in a house of cards. It all falls down, and that causes a whole heap of mental health issues alongside that. And that sort of mindset is something I had to really work hard to get out of. And now when I do subcontracting, I don't always do it, but now when I do, I always make sure I have a significant amount of money in the bank, so as I'm not sort of tied to one person's decision whether I'm going to feed my family this week, or whether I'm going to pay my rent this week, or whatever have you. And they're the sort of issues that a lot of subcontractors face. But for me, I'll tell you a bit about me. I was diagnosed with something must be about 8 years ago now. And I thought it was the end of the world. And I was already a casual drug user. So I would use cocaine, like in the pub on the weekends and stuff. And what happened was, it spiraled out of control when I had nothing left to live for. We're in my own head. But before that, I was going to these jobs and I was feeling worthless when I got there. I was treated like I was worthless, because that's the nature of the game. And then I would sit at the train station. I remember hating a job so much once. I would sit at the train station and I was just watching the trains come in and go out again, just like with tears in my eyes, not bawling, but just tears in my eyes because I couldn't face it. And I knew I had to go because I had no money in the bank. I have to go, but I couldn't face going. And that was a rough time. And then as the depression got deeper, so did the my self-worth and value went down, and then the hard drug abuse came, and I started abusing all kinds of substances, and I spiraled completely out of control, lost everything, brought myself back. And now I just see the pattern. I can see the pattern wherever I am, and I want to help, and that's what this podcast is about. And highlighting these issues of substance abuse with people who have mental health in the first place. And then if you flip that coin, even if you don't have a mental health problem, you go and do some drugs, you're definitely going to have a mental health problem, you know?
No, absolutely. I think, you know, obviously there's people with mental health problems that don't use drugs and alcohol, and there's people that are using more alcohol or taking more drugs than perhaps recommended, but they don't have a mental health problem. But there's definitely a grey area in the middle, a big one, where, yes, that we use drugs and alcohol to medicate, you know, mental health problems such as anxiety, stress, bad day at work, feeling low, you know, because the desired effects of a substance, you know, they make us feel relaxed, they make us feel confident, they make us feel a bit happier, and you know, and we ride on those desired effects for a while, and then as time goes on, the undesired effects kind of join the club as well.
Yes.
And with, you know, without the mental health problem there, anybody that starts using lots of drugs, and obviously we all kind of start, you know, on an experimental level, we try it, we like it, you know, we then kind of move into kind of recreational, where we associate that substance with, I don't know, relaxing on Friday night or a wedding or seeing certain people. And for many, that's where it stops at the recreational. But for some, you know, it kind of then becomes a more regular using pattern, and then, you know, on towards dependency, unfortunately. And it's then that, as you say, that the mental health problems then, you know, the drug use can then mimic mental health, because using regularly and a lot, you know, you are going to get feelings of anxiety and suspiciousness and fear and kind of paranoia, because they're the undesired effects of using a lot.
It's funny actually, because you just reminded me of something. I've worked for a number of bosses who come Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they're up, they're your best mate. Come Monday morning, Tuesday morning, they're hanging out their ass, and they are horrible, miserable, angry, all the things that you are during a come down. And you know, and they're like contracts managers and people like that, and they're making rash decisions on the spot to fire someone or get rid of him, he's an arsehole or whatever. That sort of stuff goes on, and again, that has a knock-on effect on the industry. And I know this probably isn't just exclusive to um construction, but the consequences of that sort of mentality on a Monday morning for someone, say like myself, say I am subcontracting, I've got my little family here, we're low on money, I go to work, and you know, the boss is on a come down, he sacks me for some silly reason, I'm now not making my bills at the end of the week. Knock-on effect, the consequences are so much more dire because you have no job security. And I feel like that's all part of the wearing nature of construction.
You know, I agree, and of course it isn't just, you know, construction industry, but we're talking about the construction industry. And yeah, the signs and symptoms of somebody overusing is, you know, all those things. It's somebody coming into work, or you know, maybe they're not at work because they've completely, you know, overused, but if they are at work and they are on a come down, yes, they're irritable, yes, they can make rash decisions, yes, they're not making proper informed choices, you're more likely to kind of take risks in your decisions, and as you say, they have knock-on effects that, you know, that are affecting the community. And therefore, if we can kind of support the community with talking about this and trying to find solutions to this problem, it isn't just going to benefit the individual, but the whole lot, and the business as well, because people aren't focusing when they're hungover or they're tired or they're preoccupied with the next drink or the next use, or they're slightly withdrawing, and they feel like shit, or they feel sick, and yeah, or they're feeling anxious or suspicious or scared or fearful, which is quite normal. And since observing the kind of industry, more and more, even just as somebody, passing sites, it's very easy to see the evidence of people using, whether, that's stepping away from, there was somebody that was working on the kind of pavement, and I could smell the alcohol from him. Often the smell of cannabis is kind of around site. I was on the bus, what you were describing, really, that kind of taking that anxiety into work. There was somebody on the bus that got off the bus stop, at a construction site, but the whole time he was on the bus, he was like, patting his heart, and it just looked, very much like he was trying to calm himself and mentally prepare himself for the day ahead. And that's an awful way to go into work. It's an awful way. It's not. We've all been in work with a hangover, and we can do one day, but if we're doing that day in, day out,
it's rough. It is rough. And then that takes us on to the safety side of things. Now, in the construction industry, you are at risk every day from a number of different things. It can be from as silly as using a Stanley knife, slipping and cutting your hand. It can be as silly as slipping a screwdriver and poking yourself in the finger. One of the most painful things you can do on site, let me tell you, is stab yourself with a screwdriver or an impact gun. But we digress. But the problem is on site is when someone's hanging, or if someone's been to the toilet or smoked some weed, done something untoward during the day at work, or gone to the pub and had 3 or 4 pints and come back in. Now, I don't care what you say, who you are, it will have some effect on your ability to function over your normal ability to function. So you will definitely have some sort of detrimental effect to your day if you are drinking a lot or smoking a lot or using a lot or even using a little bit during work hours. I feel less safe with you around. Now, a lot of people will be throwing pens at the screen and all that, saying you're talking nonsense. I can smoke weed and still be fine. I can have a couple of beers at lunchtime. It don't bother me. You're right. You probably can, but there's a lot of people who definitely are affected by it. And for me, that's a problem. And probably for most normal people, not saying I'm normal by any stretch, but probably for most normal people, that is a problem. And this is why it's so dangerous in the construction industry to be inebriated. Is that the right word? I feel like it's close enough.
Yeah.
At work is so the consequences can be so dire.
No, absolutely. So the NHS, 20 to 30% of work accidents are associated with alcohol in safety critical industries such as construction. 35% of workers, this has come from the Considerate Construction Scheme survey, 35% of workers have noticed colleagues under the influence of drugs and alcohol at work, and 33% admit to being hungover at work, and they accept that they're not going to do a good enough job.
I would say everyone's been hungover at work.
Yeah,
that 33% is a lie, because we've all done it. We've all gone in.
right.
We've all gone in rough, and that's fine. But is it fine? Like, we accept that as a normal. Like, if alcohol was invented today, it would be banned. 100%. You wouldn't be being able to get drunk now if it was invented tomorrow.
Absolutely. And and you can go and have quite a few drinks the night before, and it takes and it takes 2 hours for your body to kind of get rid of a pint. So you have quite a few beers the night before. There's a chance that you may have driven to work still under the influence. And you're right, that's not good enough. There is, there's a massive safety, aspect. It's probably, and a criminal charge if, and for employers, then if they're knowing that their workers are under the influence, then they've got some responsibility, especially if they're using machinery or driving. So yeah, it is a big problem.
One of the things I find about alcohol, and this is coming from a hardcore drug user, right the way through to, I was never really bothered about alcohol. I could take it or leave it. I like the odd bit of rum because it's kind of a dad thing to do. Again, unacceptable. But I like it. I like a nice glass of rum every now and again. And that, I did get carried away before Christmas doing podcasts, getting drunk. That was silly. Again, acceptable. But if I was sitting here, jacking up on a podcast, that would be a very different. There would be a very large outcry as to what the hell is going on. But I can sit here drinking alcohol. And if we talk about alcohol for a minute, and it's so much more insidious, only in my opinion, and my opinion is not really worth much, but in my opinion, alcohol is so insidious. So part of my recovery was a friend of mine called Adam. We'd been friends for years. He was super fit. He was 50 years old, had a resting heart rate of 50. He was competing all around the country at Muay Thai. He was super fit. He'd always had alcohol problems. And at the time, he saw me. He's like, Jesus, what's happened to you? And then he brought me in the fold and of AA. And he said, well, listen, CA exists, which is Cocaine Anonymous. And I went along to them, and I credit him for giving me, for showing me the light, if you like. Without him, I wouldn't be where I am today. Now, he took me to CA, sat with me a few times, and it was inspirational. It did not work for me because, it's very spiritual. Not to say that it doesn't work. It just was not for me. But it started me on the right track. Knowing that recovery was possible was all I needed to know. Unfortunately, Adam relapsed. Must be about 3-4 years ago. He relapsed quite soon after I got well. He was such an inspiration to me on so many levels. We built motorbikes together. We used to go out racing together and stuff like that. And then he he started drinking. Well, he started using Valium, and then he started drinking, and then his mental health started getting bad. And then he wouldn't stop drinking. And it took about 3 years, and he drunk himself to death. He died. He got found the next day on the kitchen floor, drunk himself to death. And so I have experience of the alcohol side of things. And to say that drug use is worse than alcohol use, it just isn't. It's all the same. It's a drug. It's a, what do they call it? Psychoactive substance.
I completely agree. I think, culturally we accept alcohol, as being okay. It's legal. We can, easy accessible. We all do it. But yeah, the effects of alcohol are as, it's still got the ability to destroy people's lives and and make people's lives chaotic and unmanageable. And, it still has the ability to kind of, create chaos and
it really does.
And mental health problems. And yeah, I think you're right. I think the stigma around the word drugs, that well, at least I don't do drugs, there is that kind of sort of mentality. It's only wine, and it's only anything. But then if somebody crosses that line and it is starting to have more undesirable effects than desirable, and it's starting to create problems in their work life, in their personal life, with their finances, or with their mental health, then it doesn't matter what the substance is.
Yeah, absolutely. It can even be gambling and stuff like that. There's a number of other addictions that don't have to be a substance. Do you know a funny story? When I started doing CA, um, there where I was living, there wasn't really a CA local, but there was an AA local, so Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous. So I went to the AA meeting. So I thought, well, I'll go to a meeting. We're all in the same boat. The AA people will shun you if you're a cocaine user. They will shun you. And it was quite funny because, oh, everyone wants to be friends with the newcomer. And I'd get there and they'd be like, oh, what are you here? I'll be like, oh, I'm an addict. And they'd be like, and just walk off. And I was like, what? So yeah, there is a stigma around the drug use rather than the alcohol use. It's far more accepted. And but there are ways to, what I want to do is move this on a bit now from the problem to, uh, I don't suppose we're going to get a solution, but to a solution. And I'll I'll throw my solution out there for you, and how I got well. It's a funny story actually. I was so I managed to get £600 together. Got £600 together. That was enough for a deposit. I managed to talk to the guy who had a room in a house. I gave him 300 quid, and then I had 300 quid to get more money within 2 weeks to pay the rest of the money for the room. Um, Managed to do it. Managed to pay him the 300 quid. Moved in. All I had was a bed and a TV that I got from my brother's house, and I sort of worked my way from there. Had my gold card. Took my gold card. Got a job, and within 2 weeks was earning fairly decent money, because if you've got a gold card as an electrician, you can go out and earn 200 quid a day anywhere. So quite quickly I had some money around me. I'd paid my bills, and I was well and on my way to recovery. It was so funny that I used to get, they call it euphoric recall. So if you thought about taking the drug, you could get like maybe 1% feeling of the drug coming through, and then that would trigger you to go and use again. So when I used to get euphoric recall at the time, I used to put earphones in and play Jessie J as loud as I could. It's not about the money and all that sort of stuff, price tag, all that sort of stuff. And I would play that as loud as I could. So I had Jessie J blaring in my ears, blowing all the thoughts of using out of my head. And then within about 3 months, I'd sort of rekindled my relationship with my brother. We was going to the gym 3 nights a week. And one night I was laying on the sofa texting. No, I was laying on the sofa. I had a sofa in the room now. I had my TV on the wall, my bed over there, and I'm laying on there and I'm flicking through Tinder. So I'm flicking through Tinder, and I get a match within like. Listen, it's not because I'm some handsome hunk, but I was just fortuitous enough to meet my good wife now, Amanda. And Amanda come into my life, bold as you like, came into my life, and ever since I've had relapses and ups and downs in the relationship, as you will do. The road to recovery is not easy, and from that, it just started building momentum in the right direction. And before you know it, I'm married, living by the coast with a lovely little daughter and a little staffy dog, and life's good. But the road to getting here has not been easy. But it's a fun story, and it all worked out in the end. Some people aren't as fortunate as that. Some people might say I made my own luck, but I think there's a certain amount of fortuitousness to that story. Um, Along the way, I tried CA, I tried NA. So you've got CA, which is quite if you was gonna, they're quite orthodox, so it's by the book and you have to do it in a certain way. NA is a little bit looser, so Narcotics Anonymous, they're a bit looser with how you get through the book, if you like. um I tried smart recovery, which is one not many people know about. Please look it up if you do want to try a recovery. Smart recovery is non-spiritual. So if you're not a God-fearing person or don't believe in a spirituality, much like myself, smart recovery might help. Then none of that worked for me, really. None of it worked for me. Discipline is the only real thing that worked for me, was building up my discipline, saying no to the small things in life. Then sort of the bigger things become easier to say no to. Um, we in recovery they call it the fuck it button. Um, excuse my language. Um, and building up discipline not to hit that button is primary for me. And outside of that, that's how I'm managing to stay well and recover. Now, what tips and advice do you have for people out there?
Well, I think, what you did with that, that simple Jessie J kind of intervention, but it was an intervention. You were very aware that you had a craving and that craving could make you go fuck it and sabotage the recovery that you've done so far. And yeah, very easily done, very tempting. You might have had money in your pocket, it might have been Friday night, you might have bumped into an old mate. There's triggers everywhere,
Everywhere.
You did have a really kind of responsive, straight on it with the headphones. And I think that that's the really important thing. And I think kind of around drug use and the stigma is that, when people see that somebody's life's out of control, then, instantly they think, well, why don't they just stop using? They've got a job, they've got a family, why are they using? But of course, it's not as easy as that, because your relationship with that substance has become so complex, and there's so many reasons as to why a person is using in the first place. And if we picture an iceberg, we can only see the very top, and that's the drug of choice. But underneath the sea level, are all the reasons why that person might be using. And for you kind of stepped out of the recreational into kind of more regular use when something happened and that you were worried about your health. And that could be anything. That could be something like that, circumstantial health worry. This is going to help me manage that. Or it could be a loss or a bereavement, separation. It could be job stress. People use, on mental health issues. A lot of mental health problems start, 50% of mental health problems start before the age of 14. So people's kind of childhood and poor childhood experiences, or various things, people not feeling very confident, people in the construction industry feeling lonely. They may be away from home, working away from home. There's that culture where we all get slashed on Friday night, and these all started. And then you add something else on top, like a bereavement or a separation, then all of a sudden you've gone out of, using regularly, but I'm managing it, into this is becoming problematic. And we can't just stop the substance, put it down and not replace it with anything, because we're still going to get those feelings that we were using the substance for as a kind of comforter. So you were aware that kind of was happening. You did something about that so that you didn't revert back to the substance. And through managing those early days, you were able to kind of, re-establish your relationship with your brother and get back into work and really kind of pull yourself up. And then you kind of met Amanda, which was kind of, brought more positivity, and you built up your self-esteem through all those events. After that. So anybody recovering, and there's, and there is places out there, whether it's the CANA, AA, SMART, there's self-help books, there's, online support, there's counselling, there's the NHS, various kind of, different places in different parts of the country or different boroughs in London have different services. There are things out there. There's no one recovery where one size fits all, because we're all different and we're all going to respond differently. But the main thing is that any of us have to do when we're recovering is to find an alternative to help manage what it was that we were using that substance for. So I was talking to somebody, about kind of cannabis and, using cannabis when feeling angry, and, it was an instant calmer. Now that person's still going to feel angry. So what are they going to do when they feel angry so that they don't kind of roll themselves a smoke? And we have to spend time thinking about that. You know, there's got to be preparation for that. There's got to be, you know, and we've got to be on the ball. We've got to think about the triggers, the people we need to be avoiding, the places we need to be avoiding, even the music we need to be avoiding, anything that is kind of going to...
Basically avoiding the triggers, really, the triggers that, you know, foster the memories of using. It's one of the, listen, I'll be very honest, it's one of the reasons I've moved away from my old town. You know, I got myself straight, and moving away sort of got rid of the memories of using. So everywhere I go down here, I haven't used. So it's like a whole new fresh start. I lived in Croydon before, so Croydon could be quite oppressive in terms of I'd used everywhere, driving around, you name it, I'd done it. And so down here, I have less triggers because every day is a battle. It never goes away. And for me, I will wake up most days thinking about it. And it's just putting the right things in place, not to use. I mean, I'm way too busy with the child, podcasting, working. It's unbelievable at the moment. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't. But again,
that fast forwarding the tape that you do, you have that thought about using, and then you remember kind of all the kind of things in your life that, you know, are providing you pleasure. And that fast forwarding the tape is, you know, is management of
exactly.
your recovery. And you're right, it isn't going to be, you know, I often say to people, if you, you know, like if you have a mole that needs cutting off because it's kind of at risk, you know, you can go to the doctors, in and out, you've had the mole cut off, and then that's it, job done. If addiction was like that, where we could just cut that aspect of us out, then but it isn't like that. And I think that that's the kind of the part that perhaps people don't understand, that, you know,
Every addict will tell you.
it isn't as easy as just giving up.
No. Every addict will tell you if they could just press a button and have that bit in them removed, you would just do it. If I could have that bit in me removed, if I could wind back the clock and never have used, but you lose 10 years off my life in total, I would do that, because the consequences are so dire. I don't necessarily regret it, but the stress and the hurt that I cause everyone around me from my using, and just the roughness of it all. No one wants that stigma around them. No one really wants to be that guy. It's one of my driving forces in life now to not have getting well my crowning achievement. I want more. I want someone to remember me not for getting well, but for being more than, you know, more than the sum of my parts. That's my driving force now. Whether or not I'll ever make that, I don't know. But this is all part of it.
You are, through this kind of, you know, through this commitment to kind of spreading your message and kind of trying to get other people to help, and to trying to reduce the stigma and trying to get people to understand addiction. Because as you say, nobody sets out to be addicted. Nobody wants.
No.
You know, and that's, I don't think I've ever met anybody that has decided that that's what they want.
No.
It comes with a lot of consequences. It's hard work. You know, it takes people to very low places, homelessness, prison. You know, it's, and then other people, are kind of, you know, luckier. There's lots of different, you know, everybody has a different journey and everybody has a different recovery.
Yes, definitely. Now, if people are looking for your advice, or looking for help, where do they go?
Well, so what I'm trying to do is trying to kind of, you know, get to I've done 2 training courses, one on mental health with a particular focus on drugs and alcohol and how they both kind of exist, and one that's just on drugs and alcohol and awareness of drugs and alcohol. And ideally, I'd like to deliver that to construction workers on site. And I think when you're delivering something face to face, people they have to listen more. I think
Absolutely.
if you're doing online learning, you're sitting there with your phone, you can disengage. I think when you involve somebody in something, they're going to learn better. And, we're all going to have, at any one time, 1 in 4 of us is struggling with our mental health. It's going to affect us all. And anybody that says that they don't have mental health problems, I very much doubt it. I'm sure everybody's had experience of such. And we all need to learn ways to kind of help our well-being and recognize that things that serve us well. And what really does make a good recovery is when you take responsibility for your own recovery. Nobody recovers because their mum's told them to go to an AA meeting, or nobody's recovered, unfortunately, because their children need them to recover. It's got to be an internal decision, and that person's got to want it. So yeah, that person has to take responsibility for where they're at and how they're going to get better. And there's lots of ways to get better. And I think it's really important that we get that message across, not only for the individual, but if we get individuals feeling better and being better, then that is also going to have a positive outcome on those people around them, which includes their work colleagues and the business itself. Because, I guess as employers, nobody wants to be kind of having not people turning up to work and having to go through the kind of HR process of getting rid of people or recruiting people. It doesn't make good sense for anybody. It makes good sense for everybody if people are as well as they can be. And given the last year that we've had, people are probably now at an all-time low. Not just about the construction industry, but people are using more, people are drinking more, people, there's more of a need now than ever. And, with the construction industry, I think Seamus, he lost a brother in a physical accident in the construction industry in the early 90s. And I think that they've got better. You must know, I think everybody would agree that, health and safety, physical and preventing physical accidents has got better. And, the statistics now is that more men are killing themselves than dying in an accident, on a construction industry. So and that is something that we can do something about. We're never going to prevent all suicides. It would be a brilliant place to get to, but we can certainly do a lot better. And we need to get the information to people in a tangible format. If people give me a leaflet to read, I can tend to put it in my bag and I'll read it later. If somebody's in front of me and they're telling me this message and it's, and I'm sitting there and I'm forced to listen, then hopefully something will go in. And we can all make, even when we're doing well, there's still fine-tuning that we can all do to kind of improve our emotional, mental and physical well-being. So it doesn't escape, nobody's exempt from the kind of, from having to come to these courses, and it is something that we should just be talking about more. I think that, I definitely think it's spoken about more in schools now more than ever, which is brilliant. We certainly didn't have the discussions when I was in school, just about how do we feel, and nobody's ever going to escape feelings. We all have them, and we just kind of need to kind of learn how to manage those feelings and be the best that we can be, I guess. So if I was allowed to do some training on sites, or anybody really that was looking for further information, I do a website page, a Facebook page, which kind of just has kind of relevant posts and kind of signposting to kind of different agencies such as Smart, or to kind of gamblers, or
and if you provide me with the details, I will include them in the show notes for everyone to see.
Brilliant. And and as many people can join as possible. And kind of, last night, for instance, I posted like an app that was about helping people get to sleep. And it, in any recovery, it's about learning new ways to, because lots of people have a smoke or a drink so that they can sleep better. But actually, and it takes practice. It is a commitment. Any sort of recovery or any sort of change of behaviour it is a commitment, and it does take practice, and it is hard work. And yes, your fuck-it head does come on because, oh, I'll do it next Monday, you know, I'll do it New Year, you know, I'll do it then. And we all make excuses and we all blame people, but at the end of the day, we are going to get better when we start with the I.
Well, Anna, this has been quite emotional, quite I don't know. I haven't ratified my feelings yet about this episode. I'm really chuffed to have done it. Thank you very much for your time. And I'm going to part on this word of wisdom. One is too many, and 1,000 are never enough. And that is the motto of using.